My mom forced me to work at 16 to support the family. Now she's angry. I won't give her a dime. I was 16 when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming against the chipped wood, her face stretched into that familiar tight-lipped frown. A deep sigh left her lips before she said it, the sentence that would shape the next decade of my life. "It's time you start pulling your weight, honey. This family doesn't run on air." I knew what she meant before she even said it outright. Money was tight. Bills were piling up. The refrigerator hummed in the background, nearly empty, its light flickering like it was about to give out. My little brother sat on the couch in the living room, oblivious, clicking away on a video game controller my mother had somehow found the money to buy him. My stomach clenched, a twisting discomfort that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the reality crashing down on me. I had always known we weren't well off, but this was different. Before, my mother at least pretended to carry the burden alone, sighing heavily as she sifted through overdue notices, complaining about how unfair life was. But now she was looking at me like I was the missing puzzle piece in her equation of survival. "I already help around the house," I muttered, knowing it wasn't enough. I cleaned. I took care of my little brother when she was out. I cooked when she was too tired. But the look in her eyes told me all of that was just a warm-up. "I need you to get a job," she said bluntly, pushing a newspaper across the table toward me. "There's a diner downtown. They're hiring. It's minimum wage, but it'll do." A lump formed in my throat. A job. At 16. While my friends were planning weekend trips and worrying about homecoming dresses, I was supposed to clock in at a greasy spoon and hand over whatever I made at the end of the week. I opened my mouth to argue, to say I had school, I had homework, I had dreams, but her stare cut through me like a blade. "Don't look at me like that," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You live here, don't you? You eat the food I buy, sleep under my roof? Or do you think money just magically appears in my account?" I said nothing, because I knew the words she wanted to hear. I sighed. "I'll do it." And just like that, my childhood ended. The first few weeks at the diner were brutal. My feet ached from hours of standing. My hands were constantly covered in grease and soap, the smell of burnt coffee clinging to my clothes long after I got home. But the worst part wasn't the work itself. It was knowing that every cent I earned was handed over before I even got a chance to feel what financial freedom might be like. I remember my first paycheck, how my heart had swelled with something dangerously close to hope when I saw my name on that thin slip of paper. $273. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or at least, it should have been. My mother snatched it the moment I walked through the door. She barely glanced at me as she slid it into her purse, muttering something about the electric bill. "Good job," she said, as if I should feel proud. It became routine. Every week I worked. Every week I handed over my pay. It didn't matter if I was exhausted, if I was drowning in schoolwork, if I missed out on parties and football games and every single experience that was supposed to make teenage years memorable. My mother had a way of making me feel like I owed her, like my very existence came with a price tag. "You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for me," she'd say whenever I hesitated before giving her my paycheck. "You think it's easy raising kids alone? You think you'd have food on the table if I wasn't breaking my back to provide?" I wanted to scream at her. I'm breaking my back too. I'm the one working until midnight. I'm the one missing out on everything. But instead I swallowed my words. Because no matter how much it hurt, I loved her. Or maybe I just wanted to believe she loved me back. The years blurred together. High school graduation came and went, not that it meant anything to my mother. College wasn't an option, she made that clear. "What do you need college for?" she scoffed when I brought it up once. "You've got a job, you're making money. You think you're too good to work?" So I didn't go. I stayed. I worked longer hours. I took on extra shifts. And somehow, despite all my sacrifices, nothing ever got better. The bills were never paid on time. My mother still sighed dramatically whenever she checked the mail, still acted like the weight of the world was on her shoulders alone. But I knew the truth. She wasn't struggling because of bills. She was struggling because the moment I started bringing in money, she stopped trying. She spent what she wanted, when she wanted. My little brother got new clothes, new sneakers, the latest gaming console, while I wore the same worn-out shoes for years. Because I didn't owe her anything. Because every time I let her back into my life, she drained me dry, left me scraping the bottom of an emotional well I could never seem to fill. But I didn't say that. Instead, I kept my voice even. "What do you want, Mom?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Is that how you greet your mother after everything I've done for you?" There it was, the same tired script. I had lived through this scene 1,000 times, and I wasn't interested in another performance. "I'm busy," I said flatly. "So if you just came here to guilt-trip me—" She scoffed, pushing past me into the apartment before I could stop her. "Excuse me?" I turned, staring at her in disbelief as she surveyed the small space. "Did I say you could come in?" She ignored me, her gaze sweeping over the modest furnishings, the second-hand coffee table, the tiny kitchen that was barely big enough for one person. Her nose wrinkled. "You're really living like this?" A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Like this? I had a roof over my head. My rent was paid with my own money. Money I actually got to keep. I had control. And yet, my mother still found a way to make it seem like I was failing." "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked again, my patience running thin. She turned to me, her expression shifting into something softer, more vulnerable. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she was actually hurt. "I need help," she said, her voice quieter now. "We're struggling. The bills are piling up. I thought you'd care about your family." A familiar weight settled on my chest, the same one I had carried for years. Struggling. Bills. Family. The words were designed to trigger a reaction, to pull me back into the role she had assigned me since I was 16. But I wasn't that person anymore. I crossed my arms. "What happened to your job?" She sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "Hours got cut. It's not enough. And your brother, he needs new clothes, school supplies. You know how expensive everything is." The guilt gnawed at me, old instincts flaring up. I had spent years making sure my brother had everything he needed, sacrificing my own happiness to ensure he never had to go without. But the difference was, now I understood. This wasn't about him. This was about her. If she really needed help, she could get another job. She could cut back on unnecessary expenses. She could take responsibility for her own choices, instead of expecting me to fix them. I took a slow, measured breath. "I'm not giving you money." Her face twisted in shock, like she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "What?" I said no. The word felt foreign in my mouth, but also right. For years I had given and given, letting her drain me dry. But now I had something I had never had before. A choice. Her hands clenched into fists. "You owe me." I laughed. Actually laughed. A cold, bitter sound that startled even me. "I owe you? Mom, I worked for 6 years to support you. I missed out on everything so you could keep living the way you wanted. And now that I finally have something for myself, you expect me to just hand it over?" She opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. "No, I don't owe you a damn thing." Her expression darkened, her voice rising. "After everything I've done for you?" "You mean, after everything I've done for you?" I shot back. "Because let's be honest, Mom. This was never about family. This was about control." Her eyes flashed, her face twisting into something ugly. "You ungrateful little—" "Leave." She froze. I pointed to the door. "Now." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands shaking at her sides. For a moment I thought she might lunge at me, scream, break something just to make a point. But then she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Fine, be selfish. But don't come crying to me when you realize how cruel the world is." And with that, she stormed out. The second the door slammed shut, my knees buckled, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The apartment felt heavier after she left, like the walls had absorbed the tension and were now holding on to it, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. Not this time. I stood in the middle of my tiny living room, my heart still pounding from the confrontation. The words we had exchanged echoed in my head, but there was no regret, no guilt wrapping itself around my throat like it used to. Instead, there was something else, something lighter. Relief. I had said no, I had stood my ground, and she had left without taking anything from me. No money, no apologies, no pieces of my soul to add to her collection. Just silence. I sat down on the couch, staring at the door as if expecting her to come back, to pound against the wood, to find another way to worm herself into my life. But the minutes stretched on, and the only thing I heard was the distant hum of traffic outside my window. I had won, and yet there was still one thing I needed to do. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the texts, my thumb hovering over my little brother's name. He had been the only reason I had stayed for so long, the reason I had endured years of sacrifice without breaking, but I couldn't let him be my excuse anymore. I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then, "Hello?" His voice was groggy, like I had woken him up. "Hey," I said softly. "It's me." A pause. Then, "Oh. Just oh." It stung. Not because he didn't sound happy to hear from me, but because I realized how much distance had already formed between us. I had spent years raising him, shielding him, doing everything I could to make sure he never felt the weight I carried. And now? Now he barely reacted to my voice. "How's school?" I asked, grasping for something, anything. "It's fine," he muttered. I swallowed. "Is Mom home?" Another pause. Then, in a lower voice, "She's pissed." Of course she was. I figured. I let out a dry laugh. "Did she say anything?" "She said you abandoned us," he said, and my stomach clenched at the ease with which he repeated it, as if it was fact, as if it was a simple truth she had drilled into his mind. I exhaled slowly. "That's not what happened." "I know." Those two words hit me harder than I expected. "You do?" "She does this to everyone," he said quietly. "She gets mad when people stop giving her what she wants. You're not the first." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She used to call Grandma all the time," he said. "She'd yell at her, ask for money, say it was her fault we were broke. But after a while, Grandma stopped answering." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I had never really thought about my mother's family, had never questioned why we didn't have aunts or uncles or grandparents in our lives. Now, it made sense. She had burned those bridges, just like she had tried to burn me down. "She's gonna do the same thing to you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's gonna call and call and call. And when you don't answer, she'll start talking about you like you're the worst person in the world." I pressed my lips together. "And what about you?" "I don't know," he admitted. "She still takes care of me." My heart ached at that. Takes care was a generous term. She provided, but only as much as was necessary to keep control. I knew it. He knew it. But admitting it out loud was another thing entirely. "Listen," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "If you ever need anything, you can call me, okay? I'll always pick up." He didn't respond right away. But then, in a voice that was softer, younger than I remembered, he said, "I know." And that was enough. For now. The next few weeks passed quietly. My mother called a few more times, sent a few more texts, but when I didn't answer, the attempts became less frequent. And then, one day, they stopped. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like grief. Not for her. I had long since let go of the idea that my mother would ever be the person I needed her to be. But for myself. For the years I had lost. For the childhood I never had. For the person I could have been if I hadn't been shackled to someone else's expectations. I thought about therapy, about unpacking the years of emotional weight I had carried on my back. But the idea of sitting in a room and explaining every wound, every scar, felt exhausting. So, instead, I focused on living. I woke up early and went for walks, breathing in the crisp morning air without the heaviness of obligation. I tried new foods, spent money on myself without feeling the gnawing guilt that had once been second nature. I let myself dream again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager, staring longingly at college brochures I knew I'd never be able to afford. And slowly, I started to heal. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving my apartment, I saw her. My mother stood on the sidewalk, leaning against a rusted old car. She wasn't looking at me, just staring down at her phone, her fingers tapping against the screen. My stomach twisted, but not with fear, with finality. She hadn't come to beg, she hadn't come to scream, she was just there, living her life. And I was living mine. We were two separate people. I could have walked up to her, could have asked if she was okay, if she needed anything. But I knew how that conversation would go. She would smile that fake smile, tell me some sob story, ask for help in a way that would make it impossible to say no. And I was done with impossible choices. So, I turned the other way. And I never looked back. Years passed. I built a life of my own, one untouched by my mother's shadow. I went back to school, got a degree, found a job that made me feel like I had purpose beyond just surviving. My little brother grew up too. When he turned 18, he called me. "I'm leaving," he said. "Can I stay with you for a while?" And without hesitation, I said, "Yes." We never talked about my mother. Not really. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. My mom let my brother take over my room while I was away. Now she's shocked I won't come back. I used to believe in the idea of home, not just as a place with four walls and a roof, but as something solid, unshakable. A space that was mine, no matter how long I had been gone, no matter where life had taken me. I had always thought that no matter what happened, no matter how far I went, I could always come back to my room, my bed, my things. I was wrong, because the day I came back, expecting to step into the place I had left behind, expecting to be welcomed back with even a fraction of warmth, I found nothing. No bed, no shelves, no posters on the walls, no books on the desk, no remnants of my existence. Because it wasn't my room anymore. It was his, my brother's. And my mother stood there, arms crossed, eyebrows raised, like she couldn't understand why I was just standing there instead of accepting it. "You weren't using it," she said, her voice carrying that same dismissive tone I had heard 100 times before. It made sense to let him have it. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She sighed, exasperated. "What did you expect? You left." He needed the space. It was just sitting there empty. Empty. That word lodged itself into my chest, sharp and cruel. My room wasn't empty. It had been mine. A place filled with pieces of me. A space where I had spent years finding comfort, escaping from the exhaustion of always being second place, and she had erased it, like I had never existed at all. I walked inside, but it didn't feel like walking into my home. It felt like trespassing. The bed wasn't mine. The walls had been repainted. The bookshelves that once held my things now displayed his trophies, his clothes, his mess. It was like I had been replaced. Not just my belongings, me. I turned to my mother, something bitter crawling up my throat. "Where's my stuff?" She waved a hand as if it was a trivial detail. "Some of it's in the attic, some of it we gave away. If you really want anything, I'm sure we can find it." She said it so casually, as if my entire history, my memories, my sense of belonging had just been tossed aside like old furniture. I exhaled slowly, my hands clenching at my sides. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You let him take my room, got rid of my things, and didn't even bother to tell me?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, it's just a room." That was when I knew. I was nothing more than an afterthought to her. All my life, I had been told that family mattered, that I had to be understanding, patient, selfless, that I had to accept less so that others could have more. But now, standing in this house that no longer felt like mine, staring at the woman who had chosen to erase me, I finally saw the truth. I had never been a priority, and I never would be. I could have stayed. I could have argued, fought, demanded an apology. But I already knew how that would go. She would sigh, act like I was being unreasonable, tell me I was overreacting. My brother would come in smirking, making some half-hearted comment about how he deserved it more, because that was how it had always been, and nothing would change. So I made the only choice left to me. I walked out, and I didn't look back. At first, they didn't notice. Not really. They assumed I was just being dramatic, that I would cool off and come crawling back, ready to forgive, ready to accept my place as the one who always sacrificed, always made do, always settled for less. But days passed, then weeks, then months, and I didn't come back. I stopped answering their calls, stopped responding to texts that were always surface level, never apologetic, never acknowledging what they had done. At first, my mother tried acting normal, as if nothing had happened. "Mom, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. How's everything?" I ignored it. A few days later, "Mom, are you seriously ignoring me?" Then, "Mom, this is ridiculous. You need to stop acting like a child." And finally, "Mom, why are you doing this to me?" There it was. The guilt, the manipulation, the complete inability to take responsibility. It wasn't until nearly a year later that she finally broke. The phone rang one afternoon. I debated ignoring it, like I had all the others. But some part of me, some curious, detached part, wanted to hear it. So I answered. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end, a sharp inhale, and then her voice, strained, cracking at the edges. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head. "What are you talking about?" Her breath came out shaky. I don't understand. Why won't you come home?" I blinked. "You're kidding, right?" A pause, then, "I didn't think it would matter," she admitted. "I didn't think it would hurt you like this." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course you didn't." Because why would she? It had never mattered before. My feelings, my needs, my place in this family, none of it had ever mattered to her. She had always expected me to accept it, swallow it, endure it. But now that I was gone, now that I was no longer available, no longer willing to be an afterthought, she didn't know how to handle it. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You don't get it, do you?" "What?" she whispered. "You didn't just take my room," I said. "You took away the one place I thought I belonged. And you didn't even care." Her breath hitched. She had no excuse, no justification, no easy way to twist it. Because she knew what she had done. And now she had to live with it. I let the silence stretch between us. Then, finally, "I'm not coming back," I said. Her breath caught. "But, goodbye, Mom." And this time, I hung up first. I expected to feel regret after that call, expected to wake up the next morning wondering if I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. But I didn't. I woke up feeling lighter. I was free. I had spent years believing that I had to accept less, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of love and attention they were willing to give. But I wasn't the forgotten child anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I had built a life of my own. It had been weeks since my mother's call, and yet I could still hear her voice in my head. The shock, the disbelief. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" The words weren't just accusatory. They were desperate. As if she had only just now realized the gravity of her actions. As if, after all this time, she had finally come to terms with the fact that I wasn't playing along anymore. But the truth was, I had cared. I had cared for years. I had cared every time I bit my tongue while my brother got everything handed to him, and I was expected to just understand. I had cared when my things were stuffed into boxes and shoved aside like clutter, while my room, the one place in that house that had ever truly been mine, was handed over to someone else without a second thought. I had cared every single time they made it clear I was an afterthought. But caring had gotten me nothing. Caring had only left me standing in that doorway, staring at my childhood erased, feeling like a stranger in the only home I had ever known. Caring had left me angry, heartbroken, betrayed. So now I chose something different. I chose distance. I chose silence. I chose myself. At first, They tried to pretend my absence didn't matter. I saw it in the occasional messages from my sister, always short, always indifferent. Sister, Mom says you're being dramatic. Sister, you always wanted to leave anyway? Why does it matter? Sister, he needed the room more than you did. You weren't even using it. I didn't reply. Because what was the point? They had already decided that their actions didn't matter. That what they had done wasn't wrong. That I was simply being too sensitive, too selfish, too unwilling to move on. But as the months passed, the messages changed. They weren't indifferent anymore. Now they were angry. It was a text from my brother that made me laugh the hardest. Brother, so what? You're just never coming home again? As if that had never been an option before. As if, somehow, I had always been expected to return, to forgive, to act like none of it had ever happened. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the words on my phone, feeling something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction. Not because I wanted them to suffer, not because I wanted them to regret it, but I was the one in control. They had spent years making me feel like I didn't belong. And now? Now, they were the ones feeling my absence. And it scared them. The final blow came in the form of an unexpected phone call. Not from my mother, not from my siblings, from my aunt. She was one of the few in my family who had never fully picked a side. She had never outright defended me, but she had also never participated in the favoritism, the excuses, the endless justifications for why I had to be the one to sacrifice. So when I saw her name flash across my screen, I hesitated. Then finally I picked up. Hello? Her sigh was heavy. I figured you wouldn't answer if it was your mother calling. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You figured right. Another pause. Then, she's sick. The words didn't hit me the way she expected them to. There was no immediate rush of panic, concern, regret, just a strange, quiet sense of detachment. Okay, I said simply. She let out another sigh. She's asking for you. Of course she was. Not because she wanted me, not because she suddenly cared about how I felt, but because she was in a position where she needed someone else, and she had realized I was no longer there. She wants you to come home, my aunt continued. I think she finally understands what she did. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. Does she? I murmured. Did she understand? Or was this just another attempt to drag me back in? I had spent my entire childhood being needed, not in a way that made me feel important or valued, but in a way that made me feel like a tool, a resource, something that could be used. And now, after everything, she wanted me to come back, like nothing had ever happened, like I hadn't spent years knowing exactly where I stood in this family. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. I could go. I could walk back into that house, sit at her bedside, listen to whatever apology she had prepared. I could be the good child, the forgiving child, the one who let everything slide in the name of family. But if I did, I knew exactly what would happen. She would assume that meant everything was fixed. She would assume I was hers again, and nothing would ever truly change. I opened my eyes, my grip tightening around the phone. I'm not coming back, I said, my voice firm. My aunt inhaled sharply. Are you sure? I was. Yeah, I murmured. I am. Because I had spent my whole life fighting to matter. And now? Now I was done fighting. I didn't ask for updates after that, didn't reach out, didn't check in, because I knew, deep down, that if she really understood what she had done, she would have reached out long before she needed me. She would have cared about me when it actually mattered, but she hadn't. So I let her feel it. Let all of them feel it. And when the messages from my siblings finally stopped, when the calls dwindled into silence, when my mother stopped trying to convince me to come back, I knew. They finally understood. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I wasn't a part of their story anymore, and they would have to live with that. I had always thought closure would come in the form of an apology. That one day, my mother would see what she had done. That she would finally admit the way she had treated me. That she would acknowledge the years I had spent being nothing more than an afterthought. But that wasn't closure. Closure wasn't an apology. It was a choice. My choice. To walk away. To live my life without them. The silence stretched for weeks. After my final conversation with my aunt, the calls stopped. The texts disappeared. The desperate attempts to guilt me, to pull me back in, to act as if I was the one breaking the family instead of the one who had been discarded first. All of it ceased. At first, I thought it was another manipulation, that my mother was waiting me out, giving me enough time to sit in my own decision, hoping the weight of it would press down on me until I caved. But the longer the quiet lingered, the more I realized. This was real. They weren't reaching out. Not because they had suddenly understood their mistakes. Not because they had finally grasped the depth of their betrayal. But because they had finally accepted the one thing they never thought possible. I was truly gone. And I wasn't coming back. I didn't ask for updates. Didn't seek out information. Didn't let myself wonder how they were managing now that I was no longer an option. But information has a way of finding you when you least expect it. One afternoon, as I was minding my own business, scrolling through my phone, a message popped up from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I ignored it. But curiosity got the best of me, and when I opened it, I wasn't surprised at all to see who it was. Brother. So, you're really never coming back? I stared at the words for a long time, not because they hurt, but because of how unbelievable they were. Even now, even after all this time, after everything they had done, after the way they had erased me without hesitation, they still assumed I was temporary, that my absence was just another phase, that one day I would wake up and regret leaving them. I should have ignored it. I really should have, but something in me wanted to know, so I typed back. Me, why does it matter? His reply came within seconds. Brother, because everything is a mess without you. The word should have meant something, should have stirred something inside me. Vindication, anger, satisfaction, maybe even guilt. But instead, all I felt was calm. Because of course their lives were a mess without me. I had been the one holding everything together. I had been the one cleaning, organizing, fixing, smoothing over every disaster, making sure the house ran like a machine. I had been the safety net, the backup plan, the problem solver. And now that I was gone, now that they had no one left to pick up the pieces, no one left to sacrifice, no one left to step aside for their comfort, now they wanted me back. Not because they missed me, not because they finally understood my worth, but because they finally realized how much they had relied on me, and they couldn't handle life without me. I smiled, shaking my head. Not my problem anymore. It was late one evening when my phone rang again. This time I almost didn't pick up. But something told me this would be the last time she called, so I answered. My mother's voice was quiet, tired, not angry, not guilt-ridden, just defeated. You really meant it, didn't you? She murmured. I exhaled, closing my eyes. Yeah, I said, I did. A long silence stretched between us. She had no argument, no excuses, no manipulation, because she finally understood. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't something she could fix with a half-hearted apology and an empty promise. This was the end. Will you ever come back? She asked softly. The old me would have hesitated. The old me would have considered it, would have let nostalgia creep in, would have wondered if maybe, just maybe, things could still change. But I wasn't that person anymore, and I owed myself the truth. No, I said, my voice steady. I won't. I could hear her breathing, uneven, like she was struggling to process it, like even now some small part of her still refused to believe it, but she had to. Because this time, I was serious. This time, there was no way back. I hung up that night and never answered another call again. I moved forward. I built a life where they didn't exist, where I wasn't waiting for them to realize my worth, where I wasn't second best, forgotten, erased. I was my own person, not their backup plan, not their servant, not an afterthought. And them? They had to live with the consequences of their choices. Because in the end, it wasn't me who left them behind. They had pushed me aside first. They had been the ones to decide I didn't matter. They had been the ones to make it clear I wasn't needed. So I simply listened. I let them have their wish, and I made damn sure they would never have a second chance to take me for granted again.